Thank you. Dear friends from the press, good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here for this press conference to talk about economic operation in China in 2022. Now let me give you a general briefing. After that, I will take up your questions. In 2022, faced with a challenging global environment and arduous tasks at home in maintaining reform, development, and stability, and the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, different localities and departments carefully implemented the decisions and plans of the CPC Central Committee and the State Council, maintained the general approach of maintaining stability while seeking progress, coordinated pandemic control on social and economic development, and effectively coped with domestic and external challenges. Our economy continued to grow despite pressure, and the total economic output made new progress. We maintained stability in employment and prices, continued to improve the people's lives, and made new progress in high-quality growth. The general economy and society maintained in harmonious and stable conditions. According to preliminary estimates, our GDP was 121,020.7 billion yuan at constant prices. It grew by 3% year-on-year. By industry, the primary industry increased 8,834.5 billion in value added, 4.1% over that of last year. For the secondary industry, it was 48,316.4 billion, 3.8 percentage points of increase. The tertiary industry was up by 3,869.8 billion yuan, up by 2.3%. In the first quarter, the GDP was up by 4.8% year-on-year. In the second quarter, it was up by 0.4%. In the third quarter, it was up by 3.9%, and in the fourth quarter, it was up by 2.9% year-on-year. We have seen good harvest and a steady growth in animal husbandry products. Total grain output was 690 million tons, up by 3.68 million tons over the previous year, a 0.5% increase. Summer grains reached 150 million tons, up by 1%, and early rice was up by 0.4%. Autumn grain reached 511 million tons, up by 0.4%. In terms of the different varieties, rice was 208.48 million, down by 2%. Wheat was 137.72 million, up by 0.6%. Corn was 280 million tons, up by 1.7%. And the beans was 20.28 million tons, up by 23.7%. Oil-bearing crops was 36.53 million tons, up by 1.1%. And pork, beef, mutton, and poultry reached 92.27 million tons, up by 3.8%. Pork production was 55.41 million tons, up by 4.6%. Beef, 7.18 million tons, up by 3%. Mutton, 5.25 million tons, up by 2%. Poultry, 24.43 million tons, up by 2.6%. Milk, 39.32 million tons, up by 6.8%. Eggs, 34.56 million tons, up by 1.4%. 450 million tons of pigs were registered in stock, and 700 million pigs were slaughtered and marketed, up by 4.3%. Industrial growth continued, and particularly high-tech manufacturing and equipment manufacturing saw rapid growth. The value added of industrial enterprises above a designated size grew by 3.6% year-on-year. By industry, mining grew by 7.3%. Manufacturing was up by 3%. The production and supply of electricity, thermal power, and gas and water was up by 5%. The value added of high-tech manufacturing and equipment manufacturing was up by 7.4% and 5.6% respectively. They were 3.8 and 2 percentage points faster than the industry average, respectively. By the different types, state-holding enterprises was up by 3.3%, shareholding prices 4.8%. Those funded by foreign investors from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan were down by 1%, and private companies was up by 2.9%. By products, the production of new energy vehicle, mobile communication base station, industrial control computer and systems were up by 97.5%, 16.3%, and 15% respectively. In December, the value added of industrial enterprises above the designated size was up by 1.3% year-on-year and 0.06% over the previous year. From January to November, the total profit of these enterprises was 7.7 trillion yuan, down by 3.6% year-on-year. Third, the service sector continued to recover and modern services experienced good development. The value added of the service sector over the year was up by 2.3%. In terms of information transmission software and IT services and the financial industry, the increase was 9.1%, 5.6%. In December, the index of service production was down by 0.8% year-on-year. The decline narrowed by 1.1 percentage point. From January to November, business revenue of services above the designated size grew by 3.9% year-on-year. And for information transformation software, IT services, scientific research and technology services, healthcare and social work, their revenues increased by 8.3%, 8.3%, and 8.1% respectively. Fourth, market sales remained generally stable, and sales of daily necessities and online sales grew fast. Total retail sales of consumer goods over the year was 44,000 billion yuan, down by 0.2% over last year. By areas, in urban areas, it was 38,000 billion yuan, down by 0.3%. In rural areas, it was 5.9 trillion yuan, at the same level with last year. The sales of consumer goods was 36.9 trillion yuan, up by 0.5%. Catering 4.4 trillion yuan, down by 6.3%. Basic commodities increased steadily, and the sales of food, beverages, and oil by enterprises above designated size increased by 8.7% and 5.3% respectively. Online sales of consumer goods was 14 trillion yuan, up by 4%, and the sales of consumer goods online increased by 12 trillion yuan, up by 6.2%, accounting for 27.2% of the total retail sales. In December, the sales was down by 1.8% on a monthly basis. The decline narrowed by 4.1 percentage points than last year, and a 0.14% fall on a monthly basis. Fixed asset investment increased steadily, and good investment was registered in high-tech industries. total fixed asset investment excluding rural households was 57.2 trillion yuan, up by 5.1%. By areas in infrastructure, it grew by 9.4%. In manufacturing, it was up by 9.1%. In property development, it was down by 10%. The sales of commercial housing by floor space was 360 million square meters, down by 24.3%, and the sales revenue was down by 26.7%. By industry, the primary industry saw an increase of investment of 0.2%. In the secondary industry, it was up by 10.3%. In the tertiary industry, it was up by 3%. Private investment increased by 0.9%. And investment in high-tech industries grew by 18.9%, which is 13.8 percentage points faster than total investment. In high-tech manufacturing and high-tech services, investment increased by 22.2% and 12.1% respectively. In high-tech manufacturing, the manufacturing of medical appliances and dashboards, electronic and telecommunications equipment saw an increased investment of 27.6% and 27.2%. In high-tech services, those for applying scientific research and the services enterprises saw an increase in investment by 26.4% and 19.8%. Investment in social sectors increased by 10.9%. In healthcare and education, it grew by 27.3% and 5.4%. In December, fixed asset investment was up by 0.49% on a monthly basis. And sixth, import and export of goods increased at a fast pace, and the trade structure continued to improve. Total import and export of goods was 42.1 trillion yuan, up by 7.7%. Export was 24 trillion yuan, up by 10.5%. Import was 18 trillion yuan, up by 4.3%. Trade balance was 5.9 trillion yuan. General trade was up by 11.5%, accounting for 63.7% of total imports and exports, up by 2.2 percentage points than the previous year. The imports and exports of private companies was up by 12.9%, which is 50.9% of total imports and exports, up by 2.3 percentage points than the previous year. The imports and exports of electric and mechanical products was up by 2.5%, which is 49.1% of the total imports and exports. In December, imports and exports of goods was 3.8 trillion yuan, up by 0.6% year-on-year. Export was 2.2 trillion yuan, down by 0.5%. Import was 1.6 trillion yuan, up by 2.2%. Seventh, CPI grew in a moderate pace, and the prices of PPI fell to a lower level. CPI was up by 2% year-on-year by categories: food, alcohol, and cigarettes was up by 2.4%, clothing 0.5%, housing 0.7%, daily necessities and services up by 1.2%, transportation and telecommunications up by 5.2%, education, culture and entertainment up by 1.8%, healthcare up by 0.6%, other products and services were up by 1.6%. In terms of food, alcohol, and tobacco, pork was down by 6.8%. Grain was up by 2.8%. Fresh vegetables was up by 2.8%. Fresh fruits was up by 12.9%. Core CPI, stripped of food and energy prices, was up by 0.9%. In December, CPI grew by 1.8% year-on-year, and it was generally stable as November. PPI was up by 4.1% year-on-year. In December, it fell by 0.7% year-on-year and 0.5% on a monthly basis. The purchasing prices of industrial producers was up by 6.1% over the year. In December, it was up by 0.3% year-on-year and down by 0.4% month-on-month. 8. Employment remained stable, and surveyed urban unemployment rate dipped to lower levels. Total new employed population was over 12 million, exceeding the year-round target of 11 million. In December, the surveyed unemployment rate in urban areas was 5.5%, down by 0.2 percentage points than last year. Unemployment rate of those with local household registration was 5.4%. For those with registration from other areas was 5.7%. The surveyed unemployment rate of those with rural household registration was 5.4%. The rate for those aged between 16 and 24 was 16.7%, down by 0.4 percentage point from last year. The rate for those aged between 28 and 59 was 4.8%, down by 0.2 percentage point. In 31 big cities, the surveyed unemployment rate was 6.1%, down by 0.6 percentage point than the previous year. In business enterprises, the average working hours per week was 47.9 hours. Total rural migrant workers were numbered at 295 million, up by 3.11 million, an increase of 1.1%. Local migrant workers registered 123 million, up by 2.4%. And those working in other areas were numbered at 171 million, up by 0.1%. Their average monthly income was 4,615 yuan, up by 4.1%. 9. The residential income increased at the same pace as economic growth, and income grew faster in rural areas than in urban areas. Total per capita disposable income was 36,883 yuan, a nominal growth of 5% after deducting price factors. It was a real growth of 2.9%, at the same pace as economic growth. By different areas, per capita disposable income in urban areas was 49,283 yuan, a nominal growth of 3.9% and a real growth of 1.9%. In rural areas, the per capita disposable income was 20,133 yuan, a nominal growth of 6.3% and a real growth of 4.2%. The median of per capita disposable income nationwide was 31,370 yuan, a nominal growth of 4.7%. By the income quintiles, the middle income group saw a per capita disposable income of 8,601 yuan. The lower middle income was 19,303 yuan. For the middle income group, it was 30,598. For the upper middle income group, it was 47,397. For the high income quintile, it was 90,116 yuan. Per capita expenditure on consumption was 24,538 yuan, a nominal growth of 1.8% and a fall of 0.2% after deducting price factors. 10th, the Chinese population declined, and urbanization rate continued to climb higher. Total population by the end of the year, including the residents in 31 provinces, autonomous regions, and municipalities under the direct management of central government and the service person, excluding the residents from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, and foreign nationals in these areas, was 1.411 billion people, down by 850,000. Total births was 9.56 million. The birth rate was 6.77 per thousand. Number of deaths was 10.41 million. The mortality rate was 7.37 per thousand. The natural growth rate was minus 0.6 per thousand. In terms of gender, the male population was 720 million and the female population 690 million. The general ratio is 104.69. In terms of age, those in working age between 16 and 59 years old was numbered at 880 million. 62% of total population. Those aged above 60 was 280 million, 19.8% of the population. Those aged 65 and above was 210 million, 14.9% of the total population. In terms of urban-rural structure, in urban areas, the residents were numbered at 290 million, up by 6.46 million from the end of last year, 2021, and in rural areas it was 491.04 million, down by 7.31 million. Urban population accounted for 65.22% of the total population, up by 0.5 percentage points than the end of 2021. In 2022, we made good progress in coordinating pandemic response and economic and social development. We have been able to stabilize the general economy, continued to expand economic output, and enhance the quality of development. At the same time, we continue to face complex and challenging international environment. Domestic demand is shrinking. There are supply shocks and weakening expectations. The triple pressure remain significant. Economic recovery is not yet solidly established. Going forward, we will continue to be guided by Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, fully implement the instructions of the 20th CPC National Congress and the Central Economic Work Conference, continue to maintain stability and seek progress while maintaining stability to better coordinate our two areas of work, promote coordinated development between security and economic growth, deepen reform and opening up, strengthen market confidence, stabilize growth, employment, and prices, and keep taking the economy in a good direction to realize an upgrade in quality and appropriate increase in quantity. Thank you. So this is my opening remarks. Thank you, Mr. Kang. Now the floor is open for questions. Please identify your media affiliation before asking your questions. Thank you. In 2022, we have faced some challenges in international environment and domestic challenges such as high temperature and drought. How do you see the economic performance over the year? And GDP exceeded 120 trillion yuan. What does it mean for the Chinese economy?
Thank you for your question. It is very important to look back at the previous year. In 2020, The compounded impact of changes sensing in the past century and COVID-19, together with geopolitical instabilities, have exerted more downward risks on the global economy. Domestically, China's economy was affected by the sporadic COVID cases, extreme high temperatures, and other factors beyond expectation. We continue to face pressure on three fronts, namely the contraction of demand, shock on the supply side, and weaker expectations. The environment of development is increasingly complicated, severe, and uncertain. Against high winds in the international environment and arduous tasks domestically on the reform, development, and stability front, the CPC Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, has rallied the whole party and the Chinese people of all ethnic groups to respond properly to the challenges. We've taken into account both domestic and international dynamics, coordinated COVID response with economic and social development and security, and we've intensified macro regulation. With these efforts, we've responded effectively to factors beyond expectations, and our macroeconomy on the whole remained stable. New progress has been made in high-quality development, and better safeguards was provided to people. Our society and our economic and social development overall were stable. First, China's overall national strengths achieved new progress. In 2022, China's aggregate economy exceeded 120 trillion yuan, stood at 121 trillion yuan. This is another breakthrough after crossing the threshold of 100 trillion and 110 trillion in 2020 and 2021 respectively. Counted by the annual average exchange rate, the 121 trillion yuan is around 18 trillion US dollars. Second in the world. By GDP per capita, in 2022, GDP per capita in China was 85,698 yuan, a real growth of 3% over the previous year. At an annual average exchange rate, GDP per capita was 12,741, exceeding 12,000 US dollars for 2 years running. So we are seeing an increase in both GDP and the overall GDP and GDP per capita. This means that China's overall national strengths, social productivity, international influence, and people's living standards continue to grow. And this also means that China's development is now more solidly based, of a better quality, and with more abundant drivers. It also means that our economy has strong resilience, big potential, and ample space. The fundamental sustaining long-term sound development has not changed. That said, we need to make greater efforts to continue our good work. Our long-term goal for 2035 is to let our GDP per capita achieve the level of middle-income countries. Right now, the number in China is $12.7 thousand US dollars, so we need to double that figure. The progress we've made is just one small step forward. We need to make greater efforts on that front. Second, overall economic performance remained stable. China's economic growth was faster than most major economies. In the first few months of the second quarter of 2022, because of factors beyond expectations, we saw a decline in China's economy. And in response to that, the State Council timely rolled out a policy package to stabilize the economy. We've sustained pressure and our economy steadily rebounded. As I've said, China's economy in 2022 saw a real growth rate of 3%. This growth rate, compared to major economies in the world, is a relatively high number. For instance, Germany has just announced estimates for its GDP in 2022, and that is 1.7%. And IMF, according to its data, show that for the US and Japan, their GDP growth in 2022 will be less than 2%. So China's 3% growth, given shocks coming from factors beyond expectation, is a relatively high speed growth for the economy. Unemployment, we've seen overall stability as well. Last year, 12.06 million new urban jobs were added, exceeding our goal of 11 million. By the end of December, the surveyed unemployment rate in urban areas was 5.5%, down 0.2 percentage points over the previous month. CPI went up mildly. In 2020, CPI went up 2%. Given globally food and energy prices have hiked and there was a relatively high pressure of imported inflation, CPI in China was kept at a mild level, in stark contrast with high inflation in major economies, especially in Europe and the US. The balance of payments continued to improve. In 2022, surplus in the import and export of goods expanded 35.4%, and our forex reserve at the end of the year stood at $3.1277 trillion, ranking the first in the world. Third, China's industrial development has a solid foundation. We are seeing good agricultural output. In particular, on the grain output, we saw a bumper harvest for 19 consecutive years. Total grain output stood at 686.55 million tons, over 650 million tons for 8 consecutive years. This means that we are keeping firmer the rice ball in our own hands. China's industries have fully leveraged its role as the ballast for the economy. The added value of all industries and manufacturing sector were 40.2 trillion and 33.5 trillion respectively, topping the world. The industrial contribution to the economy was 36%. Our infrastructure also continued to improve. By the end of 2022, total national railway mileage was 155,000 kilometers. Of that, 42,000 kilometers are high-speed railway. This is also the longest in the world. And on top of that, we've also set up the world's largest and most advanced infrastructure network. Industrial internet have been applied in the 45 major categories of the national economy. Fourth, domestic consumption continues to grow. Despite repeated resurgence of COVID-19, the retail sales of consumer goods in 2022 stood at around 44 trillion yuan, and of that, 12 trillion yuan come from online retail sales. China remains the world's second largest consumer market and the largest online retail market. The advantages of China's super large market remain clear. Investment in fixed assets exceeded 57 trillion yuan, stood at 57.2 trillion yuan, up the growth rate is up 0.2 percentage points over 2021, and this has offered a strong underpinning for the continued growth of the economy. Fifth, reform and innovation have deepened. We've continued to improve government functions, the business environment, and steady progress was made in piloting the market allocation of production factors. A higher standard market system has been built, and all these provided good conditions for the growth of market entities. By the end of last year, the number of registered market entities was 169 million, and of that, 114 million are household businesses. The strategy of innovation-driven development continued to be implemented, and new growth drivers have been further leveraged. In 2022, the added value of high-tech manufacturing of enterprises above designated levels went up 7.4%, higher than the 3.8 percentage points higher than that of all industries. The retail sales of physical goods online took up 27.2% of the retail sales of consumer goods, up 2.7 percentage points over the previous year. Six, we've continued our high standard opening up. Against more downward pressure on the global economy, slower momentum in the growth of global trade, China continued to advance high standard opening up, and we've supported businesses to keep production and order stable and to expand markets. Thus, we are seeing more growth in foreign investment and trade. Trading goods also reached a new record high. The number exceeded 40 trillion yuan for the first time, reaching 42.1 trillion yuan, up 7.7%. Trading services also saw faster growth. From January to November last year, trading services totaled 5.4 trillion yuan, up 15.6% year-on-year. More foreign investment have been drawn to China. The good economic prospect and a business environment that continues to improve has helped China to remain a much sought-after destination for global investments. From January to November last year, total paid-in foreign investment was 1.1561 trillion yuan, up 9.9% on a comparable basis. And paid-in foreign investment exceeded that of 2021, a new record high. Seventh, more effective safeguards were provided to meet people's needs. While promoting development, we've stayed committed to protect and ensure people's lives, and as a result, people's income has grew. More input has been made to improve people's lives, and their basic needs are better met. First, a steady growth of personal income. As I've said, disposable income last year was up 2.9%, basically in tandem with economic growth. The government has also provided better protection for people's income. Last year, the net transfer income per capita was up 5.5%, higher than the growth of personal income. More investment have been made to improve people's lives. Last year, investment in social sectors was up 10.9%. And of that, investment in health was up 26.1%. And investment in other social-related work was up 6.6 percentage points. Looking back, what we've achieved is no mean feat. Against changes unseen in the past century, and the pandemic, faced with multiple shocks caused by factors beyond expectations, what we've achieved did not come easy and is the result of hard work. We've been able to achieve these because of the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, because of the guidance of socialism with Chinese characteristics in the new era, and because of the collective efforts of the whole party and of all Chinese people of all ethnic groups. These achievements fully attest to the significant advantages of China's socialist system, of the strong resilience and vitality of the Chinese economy. While acknowledging the good work we've done, we also need to be aware that the international environment continues to be complex and fluid. The momentum of global economic growth is slowing down, and outlook on global trade is less than optimistic. The world may face possible stagnation. Domestically, China's economic recovery is not solidly based yet. Businesses are still facing difficulties in their operation. Science and technology innovation is not enough. People in difficulty are still having trouble with finding jobs. Thus, more arduous efforts need to be made to deliver better economic performance. Thank you. Kyoto News. What's your view on China's economy in 2023? What are the targets? China has recently reopened its economy after it has relaxed COVID policies. What will be the effect on that? Can you repeat your question, your first one? What are the targets for China's economic growth in 2023, and what's the outlook? And my second question is on reopening. Thank you for your question. The year 2023 is the first year to fully implement the decisions of the 20th National Congress. It is also a key year in implementing the 14th five-year plan. The external environment remains complex, and there's greater risks of stagnation worldwide. China's economic recovery is not solidly based. That said, China's economy has strong resilience, potential, and vitality, and the fundamentals sustaining its long-term growth has not changed. Resources, production factors, and conditions are there to sustain our economic growth. As China's COVID containment has entered a new stage, as relevant policies continue to be implemented, life and work in China are expected to be resumed at a faster pace, and the inner growth drivers of China's economy will continue to grow. So overall, in 2023, the goal for China's economy is to rebound overall. So looking ahead into 2023, we have the following advantages. First, a solid material basis. China has every industrial category that are listed under the United Nations. We have a complete industrial system. And our industrial sector has a strong resilience. China takes up an important place in the global industrial and supply chain system. China also has relatively complete infrastructure. Against fluctuations in the supply globally, we've worked to strengthen and ensure the security of key areas concerning food, energy, industrial, and supply chains. These have put us in a good place to respond to external risks and challenges. Second, clear advantages of China's super large domestic market. We are home to 1.4 billion people, and we are still pushing forward industrialization and urbanization. We have the world's super large domestic market, and this is a strong engine to drive economic recovery. Third, the underpinning role of new drivers will continue to be enhanced. The innovation-driven development strategy will continue to be implemented, and China's science and technology innovation will be strengthened. Effective efforts will be made to boost the development of new industries, and all these will inject new driving forces into China's economy. And fourth, dividends of China's reform and opening up will continue to be unleashed. We will continue to adhere to and improve China's socialist economic system, stay committed to encouraging, supporting, and guiding the development of the non-public sector while unswervingly consolidating and developing the public sector. We will continue to improve government functions, the business environment, and provide a fairer environment for all types of businesses. Fifth, we've gained more experience on macro control. Overall, prices in China have been kept stable. So given that, we have quite some macro regulation policy tools in our disposal. So in 2023, I'm confident that China's economy will achieve overall improvement. As the economy has reopened, I believe you've all felt firsthand what are the good results of that. For instance, in Beijing, now we are seeing more traffic jams on roads, domestic flights. 80% of domestic flights have been resumed almost back to the level of 2019. So gradually, life and work will be resumed, and all these will provide good conditions for economic growth in 2023. Please ask one question at a time. Next question, please. From Reuters. Last year's retail sales of consumer goods was down 0.2%. And another figure concerning retail sales was down 1.8%. What will China do to boost consumption, especially domestic consumption?
Thank you for your question. Consumption indeed draws a lot of attention. To strengthen the domestic consumption market and expand domestic demand is also a priority of our work this year. In 2022, the consumption market indeed experienced some shocks from the pandemic, especially those that require concentration of consumers and people-to-people contact. So there were some shocks to these areas. And the willingness to spend is also weakening. It was not very convenient to make purchases. So we saw a 0.2% decline. The short-term disruptions were easy to see. In response, we introduced a timely package to boost consumption, which effectively stabilized the consumption market. There have been some positive changes. In December, we are already seeing marginal improvement. In December, it fell by 1.8 percentage point. In November, it was 5.9%. So you see the downfall narrowed by 4.5 percentage points. Some new types of consumption were growing very fast, such as the online sales of goods, which is taking a larger share of total sales. We have given you the figures. In 2022, the online sales took up 27.2% of total retail sales. The consumption of upgraded products was also strengthened. So these are some of the new developments in terms of consumption. In 2023, we are full of confidence in China's consumption market as the pandemic prevention enters a new phase and production and life returns to normal and consumption market continues to expand. We expect a gradual restoration and improvement. There are also a number of favorable conditions. First of all, the potential for consumer spending is strong. We have more than 1.4 billion people who are themselves represent strong demand, and they are buying more upgraded products and services. And we are seeing recovery in offline consumption and consumption in services as the economy reopens. There will be less difficulties in offline consumption. And there will be new areas in terms of consumption. Internet plus, digital plus, these are all new models in consumption, and they are growing fast. Green consumption, consumption health care, and education is also very active. Fourth, we have a stable employment situation, and we are seeing increasing incomes. These are good for driving consumption. In 2023, the Chinese economy will continue to improve and strengthen. As this happens, employment and consumption will also improve and incomes will rise. All this will contribute to stronger capacity and willingness of the people to spend. At the end of last year, the government also released a mid to long-term program on expanding consumption and domestic demand. It includes multiple measures in improving employment, incomes, and consumption, and improving the consumption pattern, and to provide more conditions for consumption. It will also integrate these measures with supply-side reform. These measures, as they are being implemented, will continue to make the Chinese people more able to spend and enlarge the consumption market. In your question, you mentioned the contribution to the economy from the three driving forces. In terms of consumption, capital formation, and imports and exports of goods, they each contributed to the general economy by 1 percentage point, 1.5%, and 0.5% respectively. So their contribution to the economy from consumption, it was 3.8%. From capital formation, it was 50.1%. And from trade in services, it was 7.1%. Thank you. Thank you. How do you see the employment target in 2022? In 2023, there will be more college graduates. How to continue to achieve our targets for employment?
Employment is another issue that draws a lot of attention. Employment is a key part of people's livelihood and a very important source of people's income. Last year, due to repeated resurgence of COVID-19, middle and small-sized enterprises faced greater difficulties in their operation, and key groups had more difficulties in finding jobs. In particular, unemployment rate among the young people have went up, and we faced more pressure on keeping employment stable. Employment is the most important part of people's lives, and the CPC Central Committee and the State Council have introduced a raft of decisions to keep employment stable. Various localities and departments have worked to put employment first, and every efforts were made to keep jobs stable, create more jobs, and ensure that key groups can land jobs. Overall, I think we've kept employment stable, and no large-scale unemployment took place. To be more specific, we've done the following. First, overall employment remained stable. In urban areas, 12.06 million new jobs were added, exceeding the target of 11 million. Because of COVID-19, in a few months, we saw a rise in the surveyed urban unemployment rate. Under those circumstances, the highest surveyed urban unemployment rate was 6.1%. But overall, throughout the year, unemployment rate remained stable, in particular after the introduction of a policy package to stabilize the economy and its follow-up measures. Overall employment was improved. Last year, surveyed unemployment rate in urban areas was 5.5%, down 0.2 percentage points. Second, we've effectively protected the jobs of key groups. A number of policies were rolled out to help people find jobs. For instance, for college graduates, migrant workers, and other key groups, such policies have produced good results. In December, those aged 20 to 24, the urban unemployment rate among them was 21.1%, down 0.2 percentage point, a decline for 5 consecutive months. For those from 16 years old to 24 years old, unemployment rate dropped even more significantly, and you can find it in the materials we've provided. And also, surveyed urban unemployment rate among migrant workers was 5.4%, down 0.6 percentage point over the previous month. The total number of migrant workers totaled 295.62 million, up 3.11 million. The added number of migrant workers exceeded that of 2019. Also, we've made efforts to help those who've been lifted out of poverty. Last year, we helped 3.2 million people to find jobs. We helped 32 million people to find jobs. So, effective help were provided to the key groups to find jobs. Overall, last year, employment was stable. Surveyed unemployment rate grew slightly over the previous year. That is mainly because of factors beyond expectations. Going forward, as you've mentioned in your question, this year, 2023, we have over 11.5 million college graduates. So there will still be a relatively big pressure on employment, and structural issues are expected to remain. But as the economy improves, more jobs will be created. And from where we stand, we think in 2023, employment overall will be improved. First, as COVID policies have been optimized and life and work are gradually back to normal, businesses will reopen, their operation will be better, and all these will drive the creation of jobs. Second, logistics, people's traveling and transportation will also boost the development of services industries, including restaurants, catering, etc. These services industries have the potential to provide a large amount of jobs. In particular, the resume of high contact and high intensive industries will help provide jobs. And third, various localities and departments will continue to put employment first, as it is one of the most important parts of people's lives. We will continue to create new jobs and take good care of key groups and provide targeted assistance to them, such as college graduates. And these will help us to keep employment stable. Fourth, the rapid development of new growth drivers will also help create new jobs. And this will also help us to achieve higher quality in job creation. Though we face some pressure, but overall I think employment will be improved this year. Next question, please.
I can see you're all paying a lot of attention to consumption. I have responded to similar questions earlier. Please allow me to pass the floor to my colleague, the spokesperson of the Bureau, to give you a more detailed response. Yes, you asked about our possible policies. In the face of the complex situation in 2022, there have been a number of policies released by different departments and local governments. The central government has also released a mid to long-term program. I believe it will continue to play an important role in stabilizing consumption, driving domestic demand. Consumption growth as the economy and pandemic control enters a new phase will continue. There will be stronger willingness and capacity by the consumers to spend. It will also uplift the overall economy. Thank you. Thank you. How do you see fixed asset investment in 2022? The government has introduced a number of measures to stabilize growth and investment, but investment continues to fall. What are the possible reasons, and how do you see the prospects? Yes. In 2022, fixed asset investment was an important part of our work in stabilizing the general economy. As I said, capital formation contributed 50.1% to growth. In 2022, the total fixed asset investment grew steadily. It was 0.2 percentage point higher than the previous year. The various local governments and government agencies are making solid progress in launching new projects, stepping up input in the weak links and key areas, and putting to greater use the special government bonds and innovating new financial tools, which have contributed to the steady growth of the volume and a better structure. Investment is driving growth and structure upgrading. as a key force. The investment scale has reached 57.2 trillion yuan. Manufacturing has been increasing very fast. In 2022, manufacturing investment was up by 9.1% year-on-year in terms of manufacturing, faster than the total investment increase. And it was 8.4% for technological renovation in manufacturing, which accounts for 40.6% of the manufacturing sector, over 40%. And infrastructure investment continues. It increased by 9.4% in terms of investment year-on-year. In waterworks, public facilities, information transmission, it increased by 13.6%, 10.1%, and 9.3% respectively. High-tech investment is increasing fast. It was up by 18.9% year-on-year, 13.8 percentage points faster than total investment. The investment in high-tech manufacturing was up by 22.2%. In high-tech services, it was 12.1%. In social sectors, there is also fast growth. A year-on-year increase of 10.9%. In healthcare and education, investment increased by 26.1%. So the overall investment has remained stable and also shown some new features. Investment in the short run may be seen as consumption, but in the long run, it is also supply. It is where supply and demand meets and where we can make efforts on both sides. This year, we expect continued growth in fixed asset investment. There are a few factors. The first is building a modern socialist country in all respects. We are seeing great potential in investment increase. China remains the world's largest developing country. In terms of per capita statistics, we still fall behind developed countries by a large margin. Our per capita GDP is less than 1/5 that of US and less than 1/3 that of Japan. And infrastructure stock on per capita is only 20 to 30% of that in developed countries. So there remains huge potential. Second, we are strengthening our weak areas where we also see a lot of investment to address the unbalanced, insufficient development to close urban-rural gap. In central and western regions and in rural areas, infrastructure remains lacking. So building these weak areas will also bring in a lot of investment. China has good cities, but there are also some vulnerable areas that need to be propped up. And third, innovation will also drive the investment. For example, in electronics, medicine, and electronic business services, they are all seeing good investment increase. This is also areas of very promising areas. And fourth, infrastructure will also see increased investment in transportation, energy, and waterworks. There will be upgrading efforts, and in terms of 5G, intercity, high-speed rail, big data centers, They are also seeing accelerated progress in development. All these will contribute to greater investment. Based on some preliminary indicators, we believe that some projects that were launched in 2022 will mean more investment in 2023. In 2022, investment in the projects increased by over 20% than the previous year. It's the fourth month of over 20% increase. And fixed asset investment that were newly registered in our list in December increased by 7.5%. So based on some early indicators, we can say that investment in the new year will enjoy good support from the economy. So there is huge potential and room, and there will be driving forces for investment to keep growing. Thank you. Can you talk about the number of deaths in December and how does it compare to the December of 2021? I'm with Financial Times.
Thank you for your question. On population, I know it is a keen interest of many of yours. To answer your question, I can give you a brief introduction on statistics. In China, we do national census every 10 years. So usually we do it with a year that ends with the number 0. For instance, what we did in 2020 was a census and it covered each and every one of our citizens. The method we use is a sampled survey. Together with tracking of some specific groups, and from that we will have some parameters, and based on that we come up with the birth, death, and size of population of the year. And during the years when we don't do the national census, we do the estimate on the population on the 1st of November. This is why, regarding your question, we don't have the numbers yet. Next question, please, with CNBC. Over the past year, we saw a decline in the real estate sector and exports. Are there new drivers for this year that we can expect, which will fill in the gap?
Thank you for your question. About the real estate sector and export. Let me first briefly say a few words about the property sector in 2022. I know this is also another hot topic. It has a long industrial chain and involves various aspects of the economy. It has a large role in the national economy. Besides the property sector per se, it can have an impact on other parts of the economy. We have done some research. We believe it basically accounts for about 13 to 14% of the economy. That is the property sector and the related industries. Last year, there were some industries that experienced negative growth, and including the real estate sector. It was minus 5.1%. There are many indicators associated with it. This includes investment, which was asked by our friend sitting over there. When the property sector falls by 10%, it will drag on investment and economy. So if it falls by 10%, it will take investment down by 2.5 percentage points. And private investment grew by 0.9% in 2022. In fact, this is also closely related to the fall in the property sector, because about 80% of those in the sector are privately owned. So its effect on this area of investment is clear. In manufacturing, private investment experienced some growth. It was double-digit. So you can see the real estate sector has a big role in the overall economy. This sector has its own features. It also experiences fluctuations from time to time, which I believe is natural. You can see from the latest developments, the government has introduced a number of policy steps to build a new system for the sector. In December, the indicators show that the fall is narrowing. And some new developments are emerging. For example, in December, the fall in investment in the sector was down by 7.7 percentage point, was smaller than in November. So there have been some smaller reductions in terms of the indicators. Considering its significance in the economy and its own innate characteristics, we believe in 2023 the real estate sector will not have a bigger negative influence on the economy than in 2022. it will continue to be a pillar industry. It will continue to improve the mechanisms by which it runs, because there are a number of favorable conditions for this to happen. China continues to see rapid urbanization, reaching 65.22% in 2022. It's not a very high figure. In developed countries, it's about 80%. Last year, new urban residents increased by a large margin. So you can see there is still huge room for urbanization. And there are also policy movements on supply and demand. The real estate sector will come to its basic positioning that housing is for living, not speculation. It will become less of a financial tool, but to meet the people's demand for housing. There will be multiple channels and diversified supply of housing to build a healthier real estate sector. There will be demand-side policies to support people's need for basic housing and improved housing. These policies will come together to support the real estate sector. For improved housing, we still see a significant demand. For developing and developed economies alike, housing is a pillar industry and has a big share in the total economy. In terms of its prospects, I'm afraid I'm not in a position to come to a conclusion yet. But I can say that its negative impact on the economy will be significantly weaker. Thank you. Thank you. In 2023, China will conduct the 5th economic census. How is the progress and what improvements will be made in comparison with the 4th?
Thank you very much for this question, because it gives me an opportunity to brief you on the work we're doing on the 5th economic census. First, the work we've done on the 5th census. On November the 17th last year, the State Council issued a notification on starting the 5th census. And with that, work on the 5th census officially started. The 5th census was started at a time after the 20th Party Congress, and as China has entered a critical stage of development. It is fair to say that The fifth census is of high importance as China has completed the building of a moderately prosperous society in all respects and has started the building of a modernized country. The National Statistics Bureau have fully implemented the CPC Central Committee's guidance and decisions on the fifth economic census. We've regarded as one of the key priorities of our work, and solid efforts have been made. First, sound planning has been made, and effective work have been done on assessing relevant numbers. The fifth census has been included as a key part of the Bureau to implement the 14th five-year plan. In 6 localities, including the Shanxi province, pilot programs were rolled out to assess both economic census and the numbers of input and output. We focused our work on assessing high-quality development. With in-depth discussions and after soliciting views from all sectors, an overall plan was made. Second, solid efforts have been made to roll out the plan in Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei. Altogether, 14 localities from June to September last year. We focused on addressing main difficulties and evaluated the methods we're going to take in the census. Now a draft has been formulated. We are seeking views from relevant departments. Third, coordination among various departments have been strengthened to make sure that all work will be implemented. The census is a major work that involves the support of all relevant departments and the whole society. Now, all localities, provinces, municipalities have started to look into how to conduct census in their own provinces. And what are the difference between the fourth and the fifth census? I think the biggest one is that for the first time, we are doing both assessment on economic census and input and output numbers. This is what high-quality development requires of us. It is also a key step to improve the quality of statistics regarding our economic census. For instance, it can help us to further ease the burden of primary level workers, make sure that the numbers we collect are fully verified, are better coordinated, so that the numbers we collect are effective and useful. Second, new measures have been taken to carry out the census. In the fifth census, we will make full use of electronic records, etc., and online platforms will be used for people to register information. We will also continue with on-site information collection. For those who need to submit information, they can do it on-site and online. The work we're doing on census will be included, our work on supervision as well. We need to make sure that we stick to the plan. Everything is done in accordance with procedures, and to make sure that information are fully verified throughout the process. Any fabrication of data or information will be seriously dealt with. In 2023, the Bureau will act on the guidance of the CPC Central Committee and the State Council. We will continue with the pilot programs, do sound preparations, so as to lay the groundwork for a successful fifth census. Economic census is a full assessment of China's economic performance, and to do our work, we need the support of all those who are involved. So I hope that all those who will be surveyed can fully cooperate with our work. And we hope that friends from the media can raise people's awareness, can monitor our work, and continue to support us. Thank you. Due to limited time, we will have 2 last questions, please.
Thank you for your question. Employment is indeed a hot topic. You have been studying the Chinese economy for years, and you are right about the unemployment rate trends. In December, it fell by 0.2%. The main reason is there was a fall in labor participation. In December, this dropped by 1.1 percentage point. Because migrant workers are returning to their hometowns, and there were some infections of COVID. People were taking breaks at home. So the willingness to be part of the working labor force was weaker. On January the 14th, the State Council Mechanism for Pandemic Control held a press briefing on the relevant information. China's data regarding the pandemic, including infections, have always been released as fast as possible to the Chinese population, to the relevant institutions, and to the world. Now we are at a new stage of pandemic control. COVID has been put into category B in terms of its management. And in terms of this category, there are new rules about data release and management practices, and the work will be done accordingly. You may also follow the State Council mechanism for more information. One last question, please. Thank you. You talked about global inflation. We can see that China's CPI remains generally stable. Can you explain the difference, and how do you see inflation in China in 2023? Price stability point is a part of the foundation of a stable economy. It is also closely related to everyday life. We need stable prices both for the economy and for our people. In 2022, prices in China remained stable on the whole, and there are a few factors contributing to that. In total, CPI was up by 2%, lower than the 3% target. How did that happen? First of all, China did not increase its monetary supply or oversupply its currency. When you compare that to international levels, the inflation rate in the US, I think it was 6.5% in December, after a series of sharp rate hikes aimed at curbing inflation. And in Europe, it remains high. I think it's above 10%. Including in Japan, it is going up. Excessive supply of currency is a reason. This did not happen in China. We have not resorted to massive stimulus for 3 years. So this is the first reason for the price stability. Second is our strong measures in ensuring supply and price stability. There are geopolitical conflicts, particularly the conflicts in Ukraine, which drove up energy prices. This has a big impact in terms of imported inflation. for China. China took measures to secure energy supply. For example, coal production in China was 4.5 billion tons. Stable supply of coal is important for power generation. And also another factor is grain harvest. For 8 years, we have stayed above 650 million tons. Grain prices underpin all other prices. If they increase, many other prices will also go up. In accordance with the instructions of President Xi Jinping, we have been able to keep firmly within our hands the rice bowl of the Chinese people. If the 1 billion Chinese cannot face challenges in food supply, and if China has to buy food on the global markets, prices, of course, will rise even further. Therefore, we have secured the supply and price stability of major commodities such as energy and food. This is the solid foundation for keeping prices stable. The third factor is good supply of industrial products and services. Prices are relations between supply and demand. We have a well-developed industrial system, good supply of goods and services. They are important for keeping stable prices. In 2023, we believe prices will generally remain stable. There are no underlying factors that may contribute to sharp price rises. So CPI will stay stable. In that, we are confident. Thank you, Mr. Kang, for joining us for the first time in the press conference. Thank you all. This ends our conference today.